I leave the floor to John. Hello, Sardar. How are you? I'm fine. How are you? I'm fine too. On this beautiful day, we will be talking about games at Indieways. So the floor is yours. Okay, let me share my screen. I have this presentation. The presentation is in English, and I thought I would do the speech in English too, but I will do this in English, but maybe next time in Turkish, but next time maybe I will do it in English. The top title of my presentation was You Had One Shot. Of course, I changed the topic, but the content is the same. The new topic is the indie that never was. Well, this I got my inspiration for this idea because we receive a lot of codes. We have a lot of indie reviewers. We have mid-core, and we have mid-core games at Steam, which were later moved to mobile. And this is at once called Indie Revolution, but this has undergone a change now. Now this revolution is killing its own children. And I look at the indie games I receive, and I don't see any spirit in them. I don't know how many people are watching this, but I'm also passionate about cinema, so I will give some examples from cinema. And I will show you how things will be different when you focus on one ambition. Actually, in this presentation, I will be talking about focus and passion. And I will be talking about ambitions and results. Because when we don't have them, we don't know what we do. This is applicable for anything you do in projects, in presentations, in a film, in a work of art. So this is just a reminder. Maybe you have already heard about this, thought about this, but sometimes we forget about them in the industry. I would like to share my observations with you. Recently, there are a lot of local and foreign game codes. They send them to me as an influencer. We have a lot of games in Steam, and they're becoming more generic. Maybe you have realized this. There are two reasons for this. It's easier to produce a game as compared to the past, as compared to 20 years or 5 years ago. And in Turkey, we have some Turkish tutorials, Turkish sources for engines. And considering the amount of sources and tutorials in English, it's immense, and it's easier to access technical tools. To use technical tools, you need to access various resources, and accessing these resources is easier. And we have more faculties giving education on game design. And instead of teaching game design, they are teaching game production. I wish they would say this, because what they do is only pushing the students to produce something immediately. And designing a game is different than producing a game. And each and every day we have more and more assets. By assets, I mean Epic Games had a game called Paragon. The development process costed about $7 million. They shut down the game and they sent the assets to the pool, and they have a very important tool to produce games, and they have these meta assets. 3 or 4 years ago, people didn't care about assets. But now we have consumers who are producing their own games using these assets. So there is an inflation of ready tools and assets and ready engines. Well, this is quite good, but also an excess of things is not very good. So there's too much data out there. Maybe the friends who have not yet released their first games, they don't know about this, but those who have released their games and who are looking at data, who are looking at Steam, ITO, they have realized that these sales platforms share too much data with you. And if you have a mobile game, you have a tool to follow the data of your mobile game. And you are looking at click counts, view counts, and events completed. Interestingly, I have a background on digital marketing, and I think this should be done by data analysts. But now indie developers can access this data, and I'm not sure whether they are able to use this data properly. And when you follow the trends, particularly the content, all around the world, indie developers go into this as gamers, not as a business people. For example, there's a faculty called mechanical engineering, and people who graduate from this faculty go to a factory. So, but if a person wants to produce, manufacture cars, they don't have to be mechanical engineers. But now the industry is forcing everyone to be a specific type of worker, employee in this industry. And indie, for me, is a gamer. Indie developers are gamers themselves, and they think of ideas and they try to chase these ideas. And they are outside of the industry, and this makes them independent because they are more involved with the content and they see the trends on YouTube and whether they are clicks or whether YouTube views are marketing. And we have a very dramatic world. And in the global, we have other dramas such as we have a woman character in the game and the game is just finished. So people, the industry is in a rush and they are not able to see what happens after they release the game. And this chaos leads to a confusion among the indie developers. Now, I would like to talk about some more peaceful parts of the industry. And the content and the drama around this is not very easy, but instead of engines, you can have cameras and editing, microphone, lights, and instead of assets, you can talk about actors, screenplays, and props. So I will be talking about this gaming world.
Filmler çıkana kadar filmlerin datasına düşmüyorlar. O yüzden aslında bugün sinema gerçekten oyun yapmaya göre çok daha bence
Today,
basit.
actually, cinema is much simpler than game developing. Therefore, I'd like to mention about a few successful indies because they might be inspiring because of work, in my opinion. Today, there is a nice example I want to share with you. I am studying at Cinema and TV, for example, where to start. Actually, Alexa Red Cam is $10,000, and people are trying to catching up with such financial terms. Robert Rodriguez is an important example. A cinema was shot by him with a budget of $7,000, and then Desperado Triple. You may know Johnny Depp was there, and there was $1 million behind that and it was released and it was really profitable, and then Spy Kids was shot by him again, and then with Alicia Cameron, there was a robot film made by him continuously. Was continued in that way. By the way, Rodriguez, interestingly, made um, made some tutorials, and there was a documentary of him describing how he shot El Mariachi. There is a man with a passion in his mind, and with a friend of his, he shot the movie. And in the world, there is important thing. And today, you are managing the most successful engineers of the world. Uh, some may say a medial and unity, and these are the most popular engines in the world, right? And you are managing them. There are assets beneath them, and you have the uh, managing ability of them. But the indies in cinema don't have this because they being unable to have a cam is a different thing. Actually, at the beginning, we were renting some computers to develop the games, but today the situation is different. Actually, there are some also robotic coding lessons for the primary school kids, and we have the production tools, but some people do not know how to use them. And then I'd like to mention about Evil Dead for you. It was translated as Şeytanın Ölüsü to Turkish. The budget is $90,000. Sam Ray was the director, and he actually has many superhero films directed. And with me, I opened the chat box. I do not use the Zoom program very frequently, therefore there's some ambiguity. Okay, Sam Raimi continued to shoot with the Spider-Man circle, and his first film of superheroes was Evil Dead, and he actually sold his car, sold his land to convey the budget, and he collected 15 people to shoot the film. And in 2020, it is not that popular, but in the past, it was indeed popular during the 80s and 90s, and Sam Raimi became one of the most popular directors of Hollywood. These were the first one actually put it in your mind because the first games are also have that quality. Many of friends who are watching us may have developed their first game, and now it's stressful to continue with the second game. So I'm talking about the first now. There's another example for the first game. The budget was $4.5 million, and the film was Memento, and the profitability was not that good. Actually, you may already know the starring. Actually, these three projects are passion projects. That's why these are really important for me because I like them both. Uh, Robert Rodriguez has a story to tell. He has a style, but he doesn't have the money. But he finds a second-hand cam to shoot the movie. Sam Raimi was raised with horror films, and he has something in mind, but doesn't have money. But he tries his best to shoot the film. Nolan's second project is Memento. I don't know whether you have watched it or not. The script is well known actually. It's a mysterious script. But I can say that many of the films shot by Christopher Nolan is much simpler than this Memento. Let's continue with John Wick. Now the budget is $20 million. which is actually low for such a level of film because Ken Reeves was a nice uh, was the starring of the film, and John Wick actually turned into a great franchise because he earned around $300 million. And John Wick says that we do not need to wait for a scriptwriter or a director. We can also shoot a film because there is the event we already witness every day: people kicking each other, people breaking each other's bones. Actually, I do not know whether who were the scriptwriters, but it is a bottom to top work. And now I have two surprises for you. What you will see, you will ask whether these are indie titles or not, but they are. Alien, for example. The first film was shot by Ridley Scott, and it was also a passion project, and the duration of the project was 3 weeks. And I explained this because I want to show the passion to you. In those times it was really hard, and the budget was $11 million. Another is the Star Wars. There's a quotation here. Actually, they say that in pitching the film, it would be low budget Roger style, and it was the old style Hollywood films, and such such was the plan. But originally they proposed about 8 million, but the budget ended up with 10 million. And actually, an independent developer with today's style needs to have such passion. So a group of men uh, are ambitious, set a target for them, and they struggle to the end. Actually, they sell their assets. They try to um, reach their targets, and they are nowadays very well-known directors. And actually, their dreams come true. They try to develop something to find the budget, and they focus on something. Actually, here I want to highlight this point. Actually, in today's indie developers, I see something. Actually, I don't know what individual they think the indies, but whether to develop a popular game or whether to imitate others or whether refer to the national values. I don't know what they're thinking of or thinking about, but they can do anything, but that's quite dangerous because there are many things. And if you do not have a certain target, then their friends, you can grow your roadmaps. Therefore, you need to have a point to focus on. And the cinema field is quite the same. And there are some indies which we are bored seeing actually. And there are some dramatically running children who are running towards the infinite. And on the other hand, there are the survival games. And Unity or Emerald actually made it quite roguelike because they are told to be popular, but after some time the survival games turn into horror games at some point, and developing horror games are just like shooting horror films. With low budgets, great achievements are expected. Horror is actually belonging to the subculture. I like them actually, but after some point they become really boring. And focusing on passion. I want to underline this with a slide. Actually, these are already known. Actually, Stardew Valley, Dead and Cells, Undertale. Actually, I think in mechanical design it is very deep. Limbo, actually, the second game was the same with the first one. Phase, actually, the guy went crazy after developing it. These indies were told too much. Actually, many people talk about these. Actually, many YouTubers already know this. These all have a certain story, and they had been the stamps in the revolution. And there are some other indies which have their own focuses, which are totally passion projects. One of them is Tabs, totally accurate battle simulator, and there is a brother of this which is Ultimate Epic Battle Simulator. And those two games, actually, Tabs I like best because the visual language is really good, and Webs was a Gizmo thing. And why I prefer to this game because the game knows what it desires to do. The target is clear. The objective of the game is clear. Actually, let's develop a strategy. Let's give cop a strategic depth. These are not important. And actually, it is like a match, playing a match. There is luck actually, a luck factor, chance factor in the game. Actually, you kill a person, for example, a character, you are lucky, but if you cannot kill the character, you are surprised. And it will turn into a good game. And as for Ultimate Epic Battle Simulator, it's like a toy. And therefore, I appreciate these tabs because it's really focused and it provides content to YouTube. And of course, those YouTube videos contribute much to the earnings of these guys. And actually, as the game is a focused one, then the objective is really clear. And about the variations of the game, the roadmap to go is also clear. The sounds of the characters, the clothing of the characters, these are all settled. And it's a successful example. And actually, it doesn't mean that develop at tabs, but let's appreciate it together. Then there is a mechanical focus concept. I want to mention about it. Mechanical focus is, in fact, means sharpening a simple set of mechanics until you can carry all of your game. And the gaming academy, actually, when I read it, I realized that today's game developing or game creating culture is quite different. The semi-finished mechanics are already there, but within this culture, we used to see during the 80s and 90s that first you were writing on paper and then coding started. In the past, game developing was quite hard work because you were writing the script and then you were coding. But today, in the popular culture, then we are doing drag and drop. Of course, not restricted to that, but we have lost the mechanical focus. I just wanted to remind you about the mechanical focus. We have some mechanics. Actually, all the revolutionary games in the 80s. had some mechanics, and they were imitated by the successors. And of course, focusing on the existing ones and discovering new mechanics, I wish these are really good. And there are already existing objects, and there are different combinations of them with some other new elements. Actually, we're losing the mechanical focus then, because there is not something unique. Therefore, we need to return to that focus. And there are really important examples. One of them is 60 seconds. There are two games of this, and you have 60 seconds, says the game, and to collect the assets and try to survive. You have 60 seconds, and there are not extra things. There are not fields or agricultural lands to cultivate things, and there are some survival statistics here, and it is like a digitalized board game. And there are similar board games which have been, and 60 seconds is in fact a board, because they are based totally on, and it is not to be missed. It is like a digital board game, and it's certain what to do. The result is certain, and you try to go to the end. And another example is that game is a quite complicated one. I don't know whether you play it or not. It's one of the best games, and it's one of the most enjoyable shooters. There is a shooter, and the mechanics is quite deep here. And bringing the mechanics to the best point is in question here. You have a rifle here, and the rifle has certain mechanics. The operation style is certain, and its interaction with the other objects is described, and how many rifles or weapons used that can be used in the market in the game are there, and the game is quite deep in that respect. And another game which is similar to that game is Worms, but is quite more complex. Therefore, I didn't include it here. So I'm returning to the concept of focused passion. Actually, if we can polish the fundamental mechanics existing, then you can make your best. Then polish your mechanics, and then I'm in the right direction. And it's something remembered easily by the gamers. And Journey is another good game you may all know. Think of its mechanics. There are politics to the extent that it, that reminds the game all the time. Actually, I think it's not indie. I guess it was the PlayStation's, but we need to appreciate it. Untitled Goose Game, another duckling game, as it's one of the focused games. I am a goose and I'm doing jokes to the people, and there is no level, there is no survival, there's no level jumping, there's no crafting.
Açıkçası belki de ben çok oyun oynadığım için artık bana çok temiz geliyor ve bir şekilde çok aklımda
Maybe
kalıyor.
it's because I played it a lot. It feels so clean to me. And by the end of the year, all indies that have offered some clean mechanics start getting these BAFTAs, because one mechanic, one thing, being focused on it can make an impact. Donut County. It's a 2D Katamari, actually, if you have played Katamari. The story is interesting. The mechanics is simple. You are a ball in the Katamari, and as you roll, you get bigger and you start swallowing Planets. It's a Japanese game. And Donut County says, I'm not in Japan, I'm based in Seattle. Maybe I can create these maps. They can have their own narratives. I can be a donut and I can get bigger and bigger. And after they released the trailer, Wood Games published a multiplayer version of this even before they released this. But the only mechanic focus, I think the focus was on narrative actually. They could have focused on mechanics better. I need to show you this. M+. This was one of the games that I wanted to include here. I really like that they are focused so much on the mechanics. I don't know if you have heard about this game.
Artık böyle biraz ciddiyetsiz, kusura bakmayın. Maksat size anlatmak istediğim şeyi anlatabilmek. Galiba yanlış bir ekran görüntüsü bu ama
I don't think that's the right screenshot, but if you search N+, you will find it. N+, when the game world first started, Mario had these mechanics where the character jumped and could make movements in the air. And they were focused on this. They were crazy about this. They said, we will do a jump and we will take a second jump in the air. And you will really enjoy this. The game just flows very smoothly. It is just based on jumping and hitting on the walls. And I think we should be respecting N+ at this point. And I'm wrapping up. I think these focused indies with focus will abandon the clutter. The design carries the mechanics. Now everything is about mechanics, base building, and crafting. You shouldn't do that. When you have a roguelite, everyone has a roguelite. Why do you do that? There are people who are passionate about roguelite. But your design is focused on mechanics, or are you focused on the narrative, such as Kenshi? It's a very complex example. But storytelling comes after the mechanics. You just have to learn the mechanics first. And if you're focused on mechanics, if you have additional systems around the mechanics, do you need them? Because some mechanics are added just because they are trendy. And in 3A games, we have the start. You know, it was also in GTA, San Andreas. I don't think we need them. Or do you have a different theme in a different game? There are two very successful examples of this, because there can be some hyper casuals and mid-cores among our listeners. Do you know Bejeweled? It is the most popular games in the world are inspired from Bejeweled. Bejeweled is focused on a single mechanics. People often think about Super Mario's or Zelda, but I really like to mention Bejeweled. Today's world was created by Bejeweled, not Fortnite. Bejeweled won and we lost, because they focused on one combination, one mechanic. And then they introduced Bejeweled 2, and it was acquired by another company. I think it was one of the hyper casual companies. Then Bejeweled continued like that. And Triple Town, an indie jam. I think it was in 2010 or 2011. I was playing it on iPhone. It was an iPhone game. What happened? Make a guess. When you combine three things, they turn into something beautiful. But actually, this was a city building game, because you were trying to create a town, but to do that, you had to make combinations of three. So this was a different version of a city builder, but the mechanics of triple combinations I don't know. They are too obvious on Instagram, on Facebook. Combine dragons, combine the girls, and combine everything. These are very basic mechanics. Because basic mechanics came out of Zelda or Mario and Kojima, but there are always new mechanics. This is just to motivate you. You can discover new mechanics and you can try new things. This can be done. These are the most successful and recent examples. And don't be suffocated by the trends. Don't feel obliged to include everything and don't become the indie that never was. You can work with more cleaner mechanics. That's the end of my presentation. Do we have any questions? Yes, we have the questions in the Q&A box. I can read out the questions and you can answer them. Zeynep Duyan asks, what do you think about the current situation and the future of narrative-driven games? There are a lot of narrative-driven games. As you know, there are new visual novel games. But on the other extreme of narrative-driven, we have God of War's, Uncharted, and other games that have a story like a film. I think narrative-driven games have been introduced to our lives with walking simulators. But I think if you focus too much on narrative, you cannot come up with a good game. For example, Last of Us 2 is a disputable example. The mechanical side of Last of Us 2 was more important to me. I wish I was able to skip the narrative. But actually, this is more related to your market. Visual driven market has a different consumer than the narrative driven. Some people just want to see very good cinematics, but in the context of this presentation, what matters is how much you want to tell. Can you tell your story like want to tell, or journey, or your storytelling is about someone talking and talking. I think the narrative driven will never end, but maybe you think I will talk about civilization, but in hyper casual and mid-core games, in mid-core games, we play bejeweled like games. We go to a mansion, then become a fashion designer, then the next day we become a gardener, and this sells. In the mobile, people play casual. People think they play gardening, but they're actually playing bejeweled. I think these are narrative templates that are embedded into these narratives. But this is an interpretation of the trends. Maybe 3 years ago, Kojima may say, I'm only working on films. I won't do anything else. You recommended a game design book. Could you repeat the name? There were several of them, but I can recommend this one. Here, this one. Challenges for game designers. I think for mechanical thinking, it's a triggering book, a motivating book. It's a very inspiring book on how to develop better mechanics, game conversion. I think challenges for game designers can be the best book available. Johnson Casado asks, mechanics have been forgotten. Do you think the reason for that? the story in this game requires this mechanic.
kullanıyorsun.
Another mechanic would not work. Well, I think this is lack of vision.
Elinde aslan gibi makine var.
Because you have a very good machine, you say you want to be a developer, and then you open the RU engine, you open the assets, and what can you do with them? You don't know.
Belki bir tutkun yok, belki bir heyecan yok.
Maybe you're not passionate, you're not excited, maybe you should find that.
Çünkü mekanik aslında ihtiyaç
Because
ortaya çıkmış bir şey ya.
mechanics
Yani
come out of a need.
Zıplasın abi falan diye çok başın temelinde çıkmaya başlamış ya. Yani şey
Is, for example, a developer thought this guy should jump, but
gitmek istediği bir yol olduğu
it
zaman
should do.
kendine çare çözümleri üretiyor.
Because when there is a way to go, you can find
Zeynep yani
solutions.
tekrar demiş ki Journey'i ele alabilir miyiz?
Zeynep Duyani
Hikaye
asks,
anlatılması.
can we think about journey? It tells a narrative without a text. It's an emergent narrative. The narrative emerges spontaneously. Zeynep, if you're interested in this, you can look at Gamma Sutra and GDE. There are very important talks. There are very experienced speakers. You can check them out, because Among Us, it's not a narrative-focused game, but it's a narrative game because it's a narrative, actually. It's a story. I just tapped the guy, but there is another guy behind me, so that's a story. So you should look at where you want to focus. There is a series on my channel called Oyunun Hikayesi, Story of the Game. It's like a parody, because people think, oh, the story of the game, that's a big title, but some stories can be told without games. So if you can do that, why do you need the game? I think Kojima asks this question very often. Alpalioğlu asks, we make a thriller game. Having something unique is challenging when you make a multiplayer thriller game. Do you think this is a saturated market? Because we have a detailed project, but we don't have the budget. Well, it's a very saturated market, but anything sells in that market. Last year there was a game called GTF 10, and it was popular, Phantasmagoria. All publishers start playing it. So if you can find one or two gimmicks, so we go back to the same thing. Focus on the mechanics. Maybe we should view the PT trailer by Kojima again, or we need to go back to the old games. Because we have these PUBG, Fortnite, Call of Duty, Warzone said, I have a mechanic to revive a dead man. So there's millions of dollars circulating in this world. So Warzone added one obvious mechanic and made it look like very important, something very important, and it was a hit. Apex, as you may remember, they had balloons that allowed you to travel more quickly on the map, and it made a difference. So you can always come up with new mechanics, but this depends on your passion. Do you want to focus on the focus? You need to focus. Mohammed Karabulut asks, how much do we need narrative in puzzle platformer games such as Braid, Fez? Actually, in these games, narrative is a factor for sales. I think you, as developers, you should be very aware of this. Because when you have a story and you try to add the game, that doesn't work, particularly for puzzles. You first build the mechanics and then you add the narrative. Puzzle is where game design becomes pure. When you have a good puzzle, I think the consumer will go into a flow and they're open to understand everything that you tell them. Portal, Fez, Braid. other platformers such as Celeste. The narratives were really absorbed by the consumers, but I particularly like people who can develop puzzles because their intelligence turns puzzle into a way of telling a story. In Undertale, Tarkomba has different themes depending on the mood of the character. So there are many things to discover, but you need to match mechanics with narratives. If you can make a clear cut between the mechanics and the narrative of a story, that doesn't work. What do you think about the different simulator games published by Playway SA? Let me check this online. What were these games? Okay, I know this. Yes, I buy these games and I never play them. Yes, there is an energy here. In simulator games, there is this thing. These are very low entry points. There is a very simple thing in your life and you continue to that. This is also applicable in board games. You are a farmer or something else. So there are some very easy things that you do in real life and you make them available in mechanics. In FIFA, you play football. That's the main logic of the game. I think they have a good thing going. And they have the snow simulator and tank simulator. I played them for 5 minutes and I failed. But male consumers, they buy tank simulators. Not because they can play, they just want to discover. I think it's a good focus. That's a good angle. Berat Altan asks, how creative would it be to turn stealth mechanics into a minigame? I think stealth mechanics is introduced as minigames, such as the GTA. Everyone is having stealth mechanics in everywhere. Güner Batuhan asks, yes, that's not about my presentation. So I'm skipping this question. Can Ata asks, you said a game design which is good, it doesn't look good and special, may not help to save a game. If we have different and polished mechanics, do you think it's worth trying them? I will try to share my screen and show you this game. Shave Seal. I discovered this recently. I hope you can see this. There are games called Satisfactory or Factoria. They turn them into 2D games, which can be played on the browser. They have very simple visuals, but it has a design language. These small cubes show the colors. If it's a resource, there are circles. And even if it's abstract, you should have a design language. And chess is a very simple example of this. If we can distinguish chess from Go at one look, it's because of the design, because chess is not based on narrative, because there is the queen and the bishop, there are stories behind them. So it matters what you mean by good visuals. We don't want very detailed, elaborate design, but we want a feeling of design language. Do you think it makes sense to make a thriller game? No. If you want, you can do this, but you should focus on mechanics. Don't forget why Amnesia was so popular. It doesn't make sense if you republish Erase of Years all the time.
Bir kaydı orası bakıyorum. Ha, ilk çıkaracağınız oyun önemli olabilir demiştiniz. Ben
You said your first game can be important. I'm a student of computer engineering. I'm not an artist. Designing a game is something, but designing an asset is something else. If my first game is a clone, would I be lynched? Well, if your first game is a clone, you can publish it in abroad, not in Turkey. I guess after yesterday's incident, all local developers will have a fear of lynching. As you know, CTG team published it in English, Beta G published it in English. The global market is very big. It's 100 times bigger than the Turkish market. I think playing in the local market is the first step that will lead you to be lynched. And game is something that you can tell a story without using words. Because Bejeweled doesn't tell a story. About 15 years ago, maybe 20 years ago, Bejeweled was introduced. Now, people are building narratives into Bejeweled, and basically are still playing Bejeweled. So it's a universal language. It's not just the mechanics. So you can go beyond languages. Mario never spoke to you telling his own story. It's because of the mechanics of the game that you can hear the story. So going global is very important. Do you have any idea that would be good as a game? Yes, I have it, but I cannot disclose it. Disco Elysium. You told about this in the mechanical focus. Creating a game like Disco Elysium, would this be a dream for a developer? Well, to be honest, Disco Elysium is built on a system, and I translated into Turkish. I did not publish it, but I keep it in my drive. Maybe we tell these stories using Fate RPG mechanics. For example, many games such as Diablo are built in dragon mechanics, and Fate RPG is built on a similar mechanics.
Bir genel kültür ve bir kafa açıcılık olarak kesinlikle masaüstü rol yapma oyunlarına, en azından D&D ve Fate'e
Maybe
bir game designer olmak çok
if you're a game designer who has never checked board games and D&D, it would be sad. And Disco Elysium, there is a system in Disco Elysium. I published the book into Turkish. You can go to my page and download it. So instead of speaking, listening to me speak about this, you can read my translation. Hue, what do you think about Hue? I was quite bored when I played that. Yes, there are colors and colors are interconnected, but it's a jam game. It's a game jam game. But as a finished game, it wasn't satisfactory for me. I was bored very quickly with this game. I played it for the What Is This series, but I didn't publish the video because the game was developed in 48 hours, but if you don't add anything to this in 2 years, it doesn't mean anything. Jonathan Hajol, I think we answered your question. Can clicker games be considered as mechanical focus? Yes. Bejeweled and Triple Town. And I thought of a triple, a ticking a third example, I was going to add cookie clicker. As you know, this was introduced as a browser game. Now hyper casual game developers are using it. So if you can find a good mechanic, you can do this.
Ben sorularda sıradan gidiyorum arkadaşlar ama bir yandan
I continue with the questions, but we are running out of time.
Ben okey, tamam. Toparlayalım falan diye 40 tane mesaj atmışlar bana arkadaşlar.
Yes, you sent me a message already. Then, thank you very much. We would like to thank you for joining us. We really enjoyed your presentation. The time was not enough, but thank you again. This was quite interesting. And I would like to thank you. I tried to tell about this as far as possible. Talking about mechanical focus sounds weird, but I think we should think about this more. Thank you very much. I hope you develop very good games and win millions of dollars.